This is the title of my class that I used my grant funds to develop. And the title of the class is Nonviolence, the Radical Idea of Love in Action. And essentially, my problem of practice that I was looking at was, obviously I'm seeing a lot of teen activism, and I see it a lot in my students as a high school teacher. And some of it is healthy, and some of it seems like it's problematic in some ways. And, some of the problems I've seen over the years is that, some of my students have gotten very kind of angry and bitter about the world, which I don't think is a particularly great thing. And also, I've also seen activism become kind of a way of, basically avoiding kind of dealing with myself, and I'm just going to go solve the problems of the world, even though my students are riddled with with issues. And so I was trying to find some sort of balance between activism being really important, but also maybe bringing in some healthier kind of approaches to activism. And I've always enjoyed teaching the civil rights movement, and this idea of nonviolence as practiced by people like Gandhi and Martin Luther King was kind of what I wanted to delve into. I really wanted to bring this idea of activism back, activism that has a personal role, like you have to be up to the level of activism in nonviolence. And so that's what I did. Essentially, I attended back in June this International Nonviolent Summer Institute. This was founded by a civil rights activist named Bernard Lafayette, who I'll talk about just in a minute. And it was basically, it's a training to train trainers in nonviolence. And so I became a certified nonviolent trainer. And it was really cool because it was really hands-on, and it had a lot of simulations, and I stole so much of the training and incorporated it into my high school class that I was planning. And they've been doing it for over 20 years there in Rhode Island. Just some pictures of the class and the group, which we became very, very tight over the course of a week. It was really quite wonderful. And Bernard Lafayette actually came via Zoom into our training. It was a huge honor to meet him, even by Zoom. And he talked about this moment at the day that Martin Luther King was assassinated. He talked to Bernard Lafayette and said, essentially, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to institutionalize and internationalize nonviolence. And that came out during his speech, and I was very struck by it. And it occurred to me that this mission that Martin Luther King gave Bernard Lafayette was also kind of a mission of my own, because I was feeling very called to kind of bring nonviolence to my students. And so we bonded over that. And really coolly, I'm an English teacher, that sounded bad, but in a really interesting way, we're doing a trip to the South this year also to do civil rights and music with my students, and we're stopping at Bernard Lafayette's house, which is just the coolest thing. So we're going to hang out with Bernard Lafayette. That was the connection I made through this grant, which is awesome. So essentially, I haven't actually taught my class yet. My class is coming up in March, but I've planned everything for it. And I've done a lot of work on it. This is the syllabus that I created for the class. It's a historical overview of nonviolence, going all the way back to the Bhagavad Gita and Jesus, and then it goes all the way up to the present moment. But I guess one of the innovations that kind of came out through this whole process is that I really wanted to teach it through this kind of threefold lens of the cultural aspect, the artistic aspect of nonviolence, the political aspect, which is, I guess, probably the most popular aspect of nonviolence, but also this economic lens, which is it's a kind of a new field of economic nonviolence. And I really threw myself into kind of learning about economic nonviolence, and I'm kind of fascinated by that. A couple of, again, the kind of innovations that came out during the process of my planning. I was looking at, again, what is nonviolence? Nonviolence is about radical changing. People, these nonviolent practitioners like Martin Luther King and Gandhi, they actually wanted to convert. They wanted to change through love people who hated and who were racist and all these other problems. They actually believed if you loved those people and genuinely loved them, that you could actually change their heart. And I was thinking about what that looks like in art. And I was thinking about trench art, which is art created by people during World War I and World War II in the trenches. And it's made out of essentially armament. These vases you see on the right here are tank casings, big tank casings that soldiers in the trenches, without actually probably much talent, they developed their talent kind of in that trench. They made these beautiful pieces of art out of this, weapon. And so one of the innovations I think I'm going to bring to this class is this alchemy of evil. I want the students to take an object with a problematic history, and I want them to rethink how to see it, how we can see it with love. So that's a project. I work at a Waldorf school. Waldorf schools are, they're very creative, and we don't use textbooks, and the students create their own textbooks. And so part of my thinking and planning the class was, well, what are the pages of this main lesson book going to look like? And this was, these are Martin Luther King's 6 Principles of Nonviolence, and a student helped me kind of do a pre-created this so I could have something to show you today. But this is the kind of, at the end of the day, and I have, some of their, can you see me? I guess you can see me, right? Yeah. These are some main lesson books from other classes. They're really quite beautiful. Another innovation, I don't know, I guess another kind of just idea I had during this whole process was, I didn't know this until my training, that Martin Luther King was very influenced by Hegel and his idea of his logic, essentially. And it's so embedded in Kingian nonviolence. And I took this idea of, like, again, because when you practice nonviolence, you're always dealing with polarities, like these two kind of separate things, and you're trying to find somewhere between the polarities. And that was it's kind of a beautiful concept. And then I thought about this very sacred symbol called the Vestica Piscis, which has essentially, it's a Venn diagram where you have the polarities, and in the center you have this kind of new consciousness between the two polarities. The two come together to form something new. And so essentially at the end of the class, my students will all get one of these stones, which is this symbolic representation of the kind of the thinking that we're going to be doing in the class. So that was kind of something I found in the process of this grant. I think in closing, these are just a couple of the quotes that struck me in my research, in my planning. This idea that love is at the center of nonviolence has been very important in my planning. And then this idea, again, when I was thinking about student activism, that part of becoming a true activist is really about purifying yourself and preparing yourself to go into kind of the battle of confronting evils in compassionate ways. And I think that's sometimes missing in our activist landscape right now, that level of compassion. And so that's what I'm hoping to accomplish through the class.